Interesting stories you may not know about the Catholic Church. When it comes to the Catholic Church, many people envision it as a spiritual realm where every decision is illuminated by faith and divinity. However, in reality, behind the ancient walls of the Vatican, politics is the primary driving force. Here, powerful cardinals lobby, negotiate, compromise, and even clash to determine who will become the successor to St. Peter. After all, popes and cardinals are human too. They wield power in this life, but when standing before God, whether a pope or an ordinary believer, all are judged equally. There are no privileges in the afterlife for the Church's dignitaries. Nevertheless, it's undeniable that the papacy exerts profound influence over global politics and society. As the spiritual leader of 1.39 billion faithful, the Pope's influence rivals that of the U.S. President or the United Nations Secretary General. Thus, the election of a pope is not merely a religious ritual, but a historic event where faith and politics intertwine, and opposing factions compete to place their candidate on this prestigious throne. Over the past 2,000 years, there have been controversial elections, popes forced to abdicate, candidates eliminated during conclaves, and even legends of a female pope whose truth was concealed. So, how does one become a pope? What really happens behind the closed doors of a cardinal conclave? Does the Vatican operate entirely independently, or is it still influenced by external forces? In this article, we'll step into that mysterious world to explore everything from the Church's strict regulations on papal elections to the hidden power struggles, history-shaking conclaves, and the figures who have reshaped the Catholic Church. How did the Church come to be? To understand the stories within the Vatican's walls, we first need to revisit the origins of the Church and its role in Catholic life. In fact, the Church has existed for over 2,000 years, dating back to when Jesus was still preaching in Palestine. Among Jesus' disciples was a fisherman named Simon, son of Jonah. He wasn't from the nobility or a scholar, just an ordinary fisherman from the Sea of Galilee. Yet Simon was one of Jesus' most loyal followers. One day, Jesus said to him words that would become the foundation of the Catholic Church. "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." These words were a momentous declaration, laying the groundwork for a power structure that has endured for over 2 millennia. That is the Catholic Church. Jesus chose Peter to lead the Church, making him the first pope. After Jesus was crucified and resurrected, Peter became the leader of the apostles, guiding the early Christian community. He traveled to Rome, then the world's center of power, to spread the gospel. But under Emperor Nero, one of Rome's most notorious persecutors of Christians, Peter was arrested and sentenced to death. Legend has it that he chose to be crucified upside down, feeling unworthy of dying in the same manner as his Lord. The site of his execution later became the holiest place in the Catholic Church, St. Peter's Basilica, the symbol of Vatican power. From then on, his successors have continued to lead the Church as popes. So, how does one become a pope? It's not through inheritance, of course. A pope must be elected to ensure the most worthy person leads the Church in spreading faith worldwide. And that's where the real battle begins. The cardinals, second only to the pope in church authority, gather to elect the future pope after the reigning pope's death. The papal election process, the conclave of cardinals. When a pope dies, or, in rare cases, resigns, cardinals from around the world are summoned to the Sistine Chapel. This is where one of the Catholic Church's most significant events takes place: the election of a new supreme leader. Once the conclave begins, the Sistine Chapel's doors are sealed, cutting off all contact with the outside world. No phones, no letters, no communication between inside and out. The cardinals cast secret ballots, and a candidate needs at least 2/3 of the votes to become pope. If no result is reached, the ballots are burned with chemicals to produce black smoke, signaling to the world that it must wait. Only when white smoke rises does it mean a new pope has been chosen. Until a candidate secures 2/3 of the votes, no pope is elected, and voting rounds continue. There have been times when a conclave dragged on for 2 years without selecting a pope. In theory, any Catholic man could become pope. But in practice, if you're not a cardinal, the chances are virtually zero. For over 6 centuries, only members of the College of Cardinals have been elected, and even wearing the red robes of a cardinal doesn't guarantee succession to St. Peter's throne. To become pope, one needs more than virtue and unwavering faith in God. This is because a pope isn't just a teacher of faith. Throughout history, some popes have been great strategists, skilled diplomats, and even controllers of global politics. They've crowned kings, declared wars, and shaped the destinies of nations. Though the Vatican spans less than 1 square kilometer, its influence stretches worldwide. Thus, to become pope, a cardinal also needs support from factions within the College of Cardinals and a clear agenda to win over the majority. Typically, potential candidates have held key roles, such as leading a major archdiocese or serving in strategic positions within the Roman Curia. During the conclave, secret negotiations unfold ceaselessly. Cardinals bargain, form alliances, and compromise to elevate one candidate or eliminate another. Some enter the conclave with strong support but are sidelined, while others, seemingly unlikely, emerge as the only compromise acceptable to all factions. Factions within the Church. The only time a pope was elected solely for his virtue and absolute faith in God turned out, ironically, to be a major mistake for the Church, a story we'll detail later. Nowadays, popes are chosen for what they represent, perhaps an ideal or a promise for the Church's future. Within the Vatican, 2 opposing ideologies persist: conservatism and reform. The conservative faction believes the Church has thrived for thousands of years thanks to the stability of its doctrine and traditions. To them, Catholicism's core principles are immutable, regardless of how the world changes. They oppose reforms that might shake the foundations of faith, especially on social and ethical issues like same-sex marriage, abortion rights, or women's roles in society. They favor a steadfast pope with an uncompromising stance, resistant to external pressures. A prominent figure in this faction is Cardinal Raymond, former prefect of the Vatican's Supreme Tribunal. He has been a vocal critic of Pope Francis, particularly on matters of marriage and doctrine. He also opposed Vatican moves to relax rules on divorced and remarried Catholics, seeing it as a sign of weakness. The conservative vision dominated the Vatican for centuries, with resolute popes like Pius IX, who declared papal infallibility in 1870, or Pius XII, who remained cautious amid societal changes during the Second World War. But perhaps the most recent exemplar of conservatism was Pope Benedict XVI. He consistently emphasized the importance of traditional doctrine and resisted changes that might weaken the Church. His resignation in 2013 marked a turning point, paving the way for the reformist faction to rise. In contrast, the reformist faction believes that without adaptation, the Church will gradually lose its place in modern society. They want Catholicism to be more transparent about finances, more open on social issues, accepting of scientific and technological progress, and restructured to fit the 21st century. They argue the Church cannot remain detached from real life, especially as younger generations increasingly drift from religion. They support a flexible pope, willing to engage with the world rather than clinging to outdated rules. The most prominent figure of the reformists is Pope Francis. From the moment he ascended, Francis enacted bold reforms, cleaning up Vatican finances, simplifying church rituals, and adopting a more open stance on issues like homosexuality, women's roles, and social justice. He famously shocked the world by saying of gay individuals, "If a homosexual person seeks God with sincerity, who am I to judge them?" Though Pope Francis has sparked positive reforms and garnered widespread societal support, the conservative faction remains powerful. They await an opportunity to reclaim control. Figures like Cardinal Robert Serra and Cardinal Raymond still wield significant influence. Meanwhile, reformists strive to push deeper changes, hoping the Church won't lag in an ever-evolving world. Hidden powers. This two-faction structure is just the surface. The Vatican isn't only split between conservatives and reformists. It's also a playground for power groups that have existed for centuries, each with its own strategic vision and ambitions. The Italian Cardinals. There was a time when the papacy was almost exclusively an Italian privilege. For over 400 years, from the 16th century to the late 20th century, all popes hailed from Italy. This wasn't just tradition, but the result of a deeply entrenched power network within the Roman Curia, where Italian cardinals controlled the Vatican's most critical positions. After all, the Holy See itself sits in the heart of Rome. But in 1978, a non-Italian pope was elected, John Paul II, from Poland. This was not only a historic shift, but a massive shock to the Italian cardinals. They lost their dominance, though not their power. Today, while no longer holding a monopoly, they still control key Vatican bodies, exerting strong influence over financial and political decisions. Ideologically, Italian cardinals lean conservative. They uphold Catholicism's traditions, resist abrupt changes, and aim to keep the Vatican on its old trajectory. A strong but insular church, not easily swayed by the outside world. If you've seen the movie Conclave, the character Cardinal Tedesco embodies this Italian cardinal mindset. The Jesuits. If the Italian cardinals represent tradition, the Jesuits are the rebels within the Vatican. The most intellectual and powerful Catholic order, the Jesuits were once suppressed by the Church itself. In 1773, the order was dissolved under pressure from European monarchies, deemed too strong, too independent, and hard to control. Though ousted by the Vatican, they survived in the shadows, maintaining their network and awaiting their return. Over a century later, they were restored. Their greatest triumph came in 2013 when a Jesuit became pope for the first time, Pope Francis. This wasn't just a personal victory, but a sign that the Jesuits had reclaimed their standing in the Vatican. The Jesuits favor reform. They advocate transparency, promote lay involvement, and embrace social issues. They push for a modernized church, more attuned to today's world. But this makes them a thorn in the side of conservative forces. Opus Dei. If the Jesuits are revolutionaries, Opus Dei is the covert conservative force. Founded in 1928, Opus Dei boasts a vast network with members in key financial, political, and Vatican roles. Unlike traditional orders, Opus Dei operates discreetly, even mysteriously. Rumors suggest they influence major Vatican decisions, control church finances, and meddle in conclaves in ways few can imagine. Opus Dei's ideology leans conservative. They oppose reforms that might weaken Catholic tradition, resist doctrinal freedom, and seek to maintain the Vatican's sway over global politics. So what does this all mean? When a pope is elected, it's not just the Holy Spirit's guidance, but the outcome of negotiations, compromises, and sometimes plans laid years in advance. A candidate may enter a conclave with high odds only to falter without support. Others, seemingly obscure, may suddenly rise as the sole consensus choice. And at times, external forces try to intervene. Papal elections are not just religious rituals but political chess games, where each vote can alter the Church's future. Scandalous elections. Throughout Church history, some elections have gone smoothly, while others have rocked the Vatican to its core. When three popes coexisted. Let's rewind to 1378, the start of one of the Church's worst crises, the Western Schism. That year, after Pope Gregory XI died, Roman mobs pressured the cardinals to elect an Italian pope. The result was Cardinal Bartolomeo Prignato, who took the title Pope Urban VI. But instead of stabilizing the church, his harsh leadership and aggressive reforms quickly alienated many cardinals. Months later, a group of cardinals declared the election coerced and chose another pope, Clement VII, who set up court in Avignon, France. From then on, the church plunged into unprecedented chaos, with 2 popes reigning simultaneously. Later, the number rose to 3 with Pope Alexander V. Each had his own cardinals and supporting nations. It took nearly 40 years of conflict, resolved by the Council of Constance, 1414 to 1418, which deposed all 3 popes and elected Martin V, ending the crisis. When the CIA meddled in an election. If the 1378 crisis caused decades of division, the 1958 conclave left lingering mysteries. Amid the Cold War's peak, with communism spreading across Europe, the Vatican feared Catholicism's retreat worldwide. In this political storm, Cardinal Giuseppe Siri, a staunch conservative, was seen by his faction as the ideal pope to confront the Soviet Union. According to some accounts, Siri secured enough votes to win. Yet, astonishingly, he was passed over. Why the reversal? Theories suggest the CIA and Western powers intervened, fearing a hardline anti-communist pope would escalate East-West tensions, putting the Vatican in direct conflict with the Soviets. Instead, Cardinal Angelo Roncalli, a more open-minded figure, was chosen as Pope John XXIII. His first act was convening the Second Vatican Council, launching reforms that transformed the Church and opened paths to liberalism that conservatives still strive to block. Francis never expected to win. If the 1958 conclave bore the CIA's shadow, the 2013 conclave was a fierce internal battle. This time, the Church faced another crisis. Pope Benedict XVI announced his resignation, a near unprecedented move in modern history. Why did he abandon St. Peter's throne? Some cite health, but others suggest he couldn't withstand the pressure of financial scandals and internal divisions. Predictions centered on 2 frontrunners, Cardinal Angelo Scola of Italy and Cardinal Marc Audelet of Canada, both conservatives. Yet in the final rounds, an unexpected name emerged, George Bergoglio, an Argentine cardinal not among the top contenders, hailing not from Europe but Latin America, and a Jesuit. He became Pope Francis. This shocked observers and sent tremors through the Vatican. A Jesuit pope, from an order known for independence and reform, now held Catholicism's highest office. Whatever the reason, Francis has transformed the Church in ways no one foresaw. Unusual popes. Some popes' ascensions were predictable, but others stunned the world. Some were forced off the throne, some altered history, and some may never have existed or were erased from it. Pope John, the only female pope. One of the most enigmatic tales is of Pope John, a woman said to have become pope in the 9th century. Legend claims she disguised herself as a man, rose through church ranks, and was elected pope without anyone knowing her true identity. But one day, during a procession in Rome, she gave birth, exposing her secret. The enraged crowd's reaction varies by account. Executed, exiled, or simply scrubbed from history by the Church. The Vatican denies this story, dismissing it as myth. Yet, curiously, for centuries afterward, papal enthronement included a ritual to verify the candidate's maleness. Coincidence or a trace of truth? No one can say for sure. The tragedy of Pope Celestine V. If Pope John is a mystery, Pope Celestine V is a tragedy. Pietro Angelerio was a reclusive monk with no political ambition. Living ascetically in a mountain cave in Morone, Italy, his saintly reputation spread, though he sought no fame. In 1294, a 2-year conclave failed to choose a pope. The cardinals elected him as a compromise due to his virtue, and they erred gravely. When told he'd been made pope, Pietro reportedly panicked and refused, even attempting to flee. Pressured relentlessly, he relented. Legend says he rode a donkey to Rome for his enthronement, clad in a worn monk's robe rather than papal finery. Celestine V couldn't manage the Vatican's complex power structure. Taciturn and bewildered by decisions, he was knave to its factions and schemes. After 5 months, he resigned, the first pope to do so. But his story didn't end there. His successor, Pope Boniface VIII, feared Celestine's freedom could be exploited by rivals to divide the church. So, Celestine was imprisoned in Fumont Castle, a damp, frigid, isolated fortress. An 80-year-old man who'd harmed no one endured 10 months of lonely suffering. He died there on May 19, 1296, aged 81. Records attribute his death to illness and harsh conditions, but conspiracy theories suggest Boniface VIII ordered his murder to eliminate the threat. The cadaver trial. What if a pope faced trial after death? While Celestine V left quietly, Pope Formosus starred in one of history's strangest, grisliest episodes, the Cadaver Synod. It began in 896 when Formosus died. A controversial figure with many enemies, he couldn't have anticipated what followed. Months later, his successor, Pope Stephen VI, ordered his decomposing corpse exhumed, dressed in papal robes, and tried before a council of cardinals. Yes, a real trial, with a corpse as the defendant. In this bizarre proceeding, a deacon spoke for Formosus, answering the court's questions. Found guilty of usurping the papacy and breaking church law, his body was stripped of vestments, had its blessing fingers severed, and was thrown into the Tiber River. But the nightmare continued. Months later, Stephen VI was deposed and killed in a coup. Formosus' body was recovered, reburied, and the trial declared void. Yet the event shook faith in the Church and remains one of the Vatican's darkest chapters. Francis, the Reformist Pope. Among notable popes, Pope Francis stands out, breaking nearly every precedent. The first Jesuit pope in history, he hails from a different continent, South America. From his enthronement, he shunned extravagance, rejecting the Vatican palace, luxury cars, traditional red shoes, and even cooking for himself instead of using a chef. More crucially, he's reshaped the Church's structure and ideology. Francis has driven financial reform, overhauled the Vatican Bank, and boosted transparency. He's engaged with the LGBTQ+ community, softened stances on social issues, and opened roles for women in the Church. Yet he faces fierce opposition from conservatives, who believe he's undermining Catholicism's foundations. They despise him as a disruptor, and rumors suggest they're plotting to replace him soon. Now, the big question. How long will Francis remain? Age and health are growing concerns. He's been hospitalized multiple times, often uses a wheelchair, and his fatigue is increasingly evident in public. The Vatican denies rumors of his worsening health, but nothing is certain. Should that day come, the Church will enter another turbulent era, with factions vying for power once more. Regardless of how long Francis reigns, he's undeniably changed the Vatican forever. One day, white smoke will rise again from the Sistine Chapel, and the battle between Francis' supporters and those eager to erase his legacy will erupt. That's the full content of this article. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.